Good morning. We're back at it. Today's an exciting day. We are headed into Quartzite today. So I'm here with Bob Wells. I've had the amazing opportunity to meet Bob Wells and be on his list of people that he did an interview of my van tour. Look at me, I'm like speechless. Like, and what's so amazing about this is that when I was first looking at vehicles and looking into YouTube when I was first getting started on my journey. I was using YouTube as a resource to figure out what kind of vehicle I wanted and what kind of build and what things were out there that would help assist with that, what products and things like that. And so Bob Wells' channel, Cheap RV Living, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and I'll put it on the screen here, is one of the big resources that was really helpful for me in thinking like, this is totally doable, and not just doable, but like comfortable and accessible and all that. So the fact that now I'm here, I'm just grateful. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to come here and meet Bob Wells, to meet you, and I'm very grateful for that. Thank you. It's a privilege to be here and to be on your list of van tours. So
it's my pleasure.
And I'd love to ask a couple questions,
sure.
Both because I'm personally curious, and then if anybody is interested that follows my channel. So I guess my first question would be, when did you first start thinking about van life, like as an option?
That's an interesting question. I don't think anyone's ever asked me that exact question. I grew up in Alaska. My family moved there when I was 6 years old, and so hiking, backpacking, my dad was a pilot and a hunter, and so we were always out in the woods and in Alaska, the tundra, and so it was just became a part of my life, the idea of being out in nature and free and moving. And I think so I've always been a backpacker and hiker,
Mm-hmm.
and the stretch from backpacking, everything's on your back,
Yep.
to
Yeah.
in a van, everything's in your van.
It feels like luxury, actually.
Very much so. It's an easy stretch.
Yeah.
It's not a leap of faith at all, which it is for most people. When I was much younger, I drove school bus for 5 years. I was always unconventional. I wanted to just have my freedom, so I drove school bus. And I had a summertime job of delivering pianos.
Okay.
And we drove we delivered the pianos. There were 4 of us in a box van, van nose, box back. And I remember us I remember us making a delivery, and I looked around and thought, this would make a great home.
Right, that's where it all started.
And all the other guys saw it, looked around and thought, well, it'd be tiny, but yeah, this would make a great.
You're onto something.
It'd be a great camper. And
Yeah.
so I think that might have been one of my very first thoughts of it. I actually moved into the van first time to live in it for a while in 1995. I went through a divorce, couldn't afford to pay, literally could not afford to pay to maintain our home that we had lived in. Now I was no longer living in, and get a new apartment. So I guess I remembered all those years ago and bought another box van, very similar to that one, and probably as old.
Yeah.
And I moved into a van, and so I lived in that van for 6 years, and then moved into a house. Hated living in that house.
Yeah.
Decided I could never live in another house ever again. And then I got married and moved into her house. And then in 2008, we separated. I couldn't live in a house, and she couldn't live in a van, so I moved out, and I've been living in a van ever since 2008.
Okay.
So 2 chunks.
So you also answered, I think, in that, and correct me if I'm wrong with this, the why, and it was around saving money.
Yes. Well, I'd always had this call, this idea of just walking off into the woods and living off the woods.
Exactly. Yep. I'm there with you.
Yeah. So that idea was deeply ingrained in me, just somehow to get out and be free. And I don't, that was just, I think that's an Alaskan thing. I think it's something you're born with. The urge to be a nomad is stronger in some people than others, and it was very strong in me. And at first, I was going through a divorce, And then I couldn't afford to rent an apartment, and I had to move into a van, and I just felt like a complete loser and failure in life. And so for quite a while, I hated it. I despised it, and would have gotten out of it as soon as I could. But after about 6 months, I solved all the problems. You know, it's easy to solve the problems if you're already a camper, backpacker. If you can live in a tent, you can live in a box van really well. So I solved all the problems, and I started to like it. And then, you know, once all the emotion, and then the divorce, the emotional turmoil of the divorce started to settle. And before, I would say within the first year, I'd fallen in love with it. And the freedom, the ability to go anywhere I want. At the end of every month, I kept that money in my pocket. I didn't pay the landlord. And then as some of the money fell off from the divorce, I had extra money at the end of every month. And boy, I really like that financial freedom, but just the freedom to be independent and go. And I love living tiny. And you know, the whole tiny house movement, now there's an urge. I think there's a human urge to live tiny. And we've just, civilization has so completely covered that over, but it's still there. And for some people, it just comes out. They can't hide it anymore.
I'm looking towards getting, you know, a tiny home at some point. So I really enjoy touring these different tiny homes, and I'm often find myself thinking that's too much space. Like, even like, you know, it's a whatever. It's like, why is there a bedroom? There's a loft. You don't need both. Like, you know. So I agree that I think that it's there's so much beauty in the simple, kind of a simple life of having less, being responsible for less, and being more intentional about the things that we do choose to, you know, take responsibility for.
I bought land recently. I had the same urge you have. You know, it's odd. I have this extremely strong nomad urge, but I have and always have had an urge to own a piece of land and be able to be on it, but to be able to leave it. I'm thinking at my age, I'm almost 70. I'm thinking about 5 years, 10 years, I may not be able to do this anymore. And so I'll be slowing down, and I want to have a place. So I just bought a piece of land, and I bought a shed, just a plain old shed, and it's 12 by 14. That doesn't seem very big. And I walk in there and I think, this is too big. I might have bought the wrong thing. This is too big. I think it'll be fine. Nothing's in it right now. But and as soon as I make it a home, more of a home, I think it'll be more comfortable. But yeah, that urge that tiny is I think it's very natural.
Well, congratulations on the land. I'm looking forward to that too. And there's some pieces around like gardening and being able to be self-sufficient that are harder to do. I did have a strawberry plant in my Honda for a while, and I was able to produce like 3 strawberries, but you know, I'm not going to live for a year off 3 strawberries, but having some land to work with that might, you know, be possible. So hopefully. So that's kind of one of the things too, but I certainly want to keep traveling. So
there's to me, they're not a conflict. Owning a piece of land. My current plan is to be here in Quartzite 4 months out of the year. I work here. This is my job, and so I'll come here and I'll work. And even when I'm not working, I don't want to be in the cold. And my land is cold in the winter. It snows. It's 4 seasons, so I'll be here in the winter. I'll be on the land 2-3 months. Then I'll travel in the summer, anywhere and everywhere. So I think that is a really good plan. It works for me, I think.
Definitely. Well, my last question would be, because I get this a lot, where people who are just getting into van life or thinking about it, they'll ask, you know, what's some advice or some tips that I have. So I figured that for people that are following my channel, what better way to answer that than to ask somebody with a wealth of knowledge and experience and a mentor in the van life community. So I guess, you know, what would be your response to that question of, you know, maybe 1 or 2 words of advice about somebody who's interested in getting into van life?
Well, the first thing I would say is there are 2 large groups out there. In my audience, we have a lot of people who are just absolutely forced into it. They've got their eviction notice, and they're going to be living in a van that next week. So, or their car that next week. So the advice to one, and there's also the people like you who had the time. You're waiting for your son to grow up, and I did this exact same thing at one point in my life. I waited till my son grew up, graduated, and began his life. That's 2 different groups of people, and there's 2 very, very different answers. But a couple of things I would suggest to nearly everyone. Um, if you have the time, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. You took a long trip to test it out and to try DoorDash all over the country. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. Maybe start out, buy a minivan, live in your house for the last year or two, and then start taking your trips in the minivan or your Honda Pilot.
Yep.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So it's not all or nothing. Save all the money you can. The biggest emergency fund you possibly can get, and that would be my advice for both groups of people. Sell all that you can. Get all the cash out of it you can. Take an extra job till you can build up your income. Get the most reliable vehicle you can. But things are gonna break.
Yeah.
Going to be rainy days. Going to be some bad times. So cash in the bank is so important to get you through that. Be willing to stop and work. Even I'm on a fixed income. I'm on Social Security and I have a pension. Of course, now I have income from YouTube, but most people don't. So be prepared to stop and work if you have to keep your emergency fund up. You just got to do that. I would say for a lot of people, I know this is probably more than you wanted, but I can't stop.
Oh, no, it's great. Yeah.
I can't stop.
Yeah.
And one thing I would say to everyone is it can be a real psychological, emotional shock to your system when you first move into the vehicle. And whatever the vehicle is, that can be, but the smaller, you're going to start living in your car all of a sudden. So if you're being evicted and one day you're living in an apartment, one day for the first time in your life you're sleeping in your car, that's a real shock.
Yeah.
And expect it to be a rough go. It might very well be. Occasionally that can be easy and smooth for people, but a lot of times, I think the majority of the times, it's a rough go, and be prepared to get through that. I mean, you're parking someplace in a vehicle you can't imagine you're sleeping in a vehicle, and you wake up and there's noise around you and there's people driving around, there's people walking around and talking. If you're in a city especially, or maybe you've never camped a day in your life and all of a sudden you're in the middle of the woods, it can be, expect that. Forearmed is foreready as far as I'm concerned, that it can be really tough. And even if you've been thinking about it for a while and made your practice trips, not all or nothing, I've made some trips. I've gotten used to go camping in my car and cooking in my car and going to the bathroom in the car, or I've gotten a tent so I can go out and sleep in a tent. Whatever you're doing, it can still be real psychologically different and difficult. Be ready for that and work your way through it. Don't give up too soon. That's where working your way into it really pays off, because after you made that trip, that was kind of I imagine there was some culture shock in that. The first time you just took off and you're sleeping in your Pilot.
It was my Toyota Corolla at the time, actually.
Even harder.
And that's what I moved into when I first started my my full-time vehicle journey. It was that, and I experienced what you're talking about, and I was like, what am I doing? Like,
right.
And it took me a while to figure out that I could take the seats out in my Toyota Corolla. At first I was just folding it down, one of them, and it was so uncomfortable. And so that, so the logistics that I thought I had worked out, but when you're actually like doing it, not just like on an extended road trip, but full time. Yes. And then the other piece was what you're talking about, the emotional piece. And I think that that took longer than the logistic piece of just feeling like this is my home now, and my home moves. And so my community looks different. And I think that I was, we have such a community of, the grocery stores we go to, the coffee shops, people that we don't even really think about, but that we see kind of day to day. And so being on the road all the time and having those people constantly change, it was an adjustment. So figuring out how to create community while traveling.
Yes.
Yeah. So thanks. That's
I
good.
want to give one more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, one more.
Yeah.
One more tip I'd pass along is I have seen a lot of people come out and they bought a lot of new stuff, and a lot of it they didn't need. I mean, they just really did not need that. It filled their van, their rig, car, whatever they were in, and it was not a value, was not a priority. And the things they really had to have, they didn't buy.
Yeah.
So my big advice I'd offer everyone is go really slow on buying. That's where easing your way into it, taking trips. You got to have some place to sleep. You got to be comfortable sleeping. So however you work that out, you've got to have that. You've got to be able to cook. So just a simple backpacking stove or Coleman one burner stove. You got to go to the bathroom. You got to have privacy. You've got to have organization. Minimize everything you purchase and purchase everything possible at thrift stores. That way, if you buy the wrong thing, you got to replace it. No big loss. Don't go out to Walmart and buy all new stuff. I'll need that. I'll need that. I'll need that. Goes really slow. You want to replace all the systems in your house. You need a bed. You need a bathroom. You need some place to lounge. You need a kitchen. Just replace the most basic functions of your house and no more. Bring the minimum. Almost everyone brings too much.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many people I've talked to that they left a breadcrumb trail across the country
Yes.
of thrift stores.
Yeah, Goodwill donations.
Drop
Yeah.
this off. Oh, I can't, why did I bring this? Drop this off. They spent the money for it, and then it's just going away.
I don't need 5 sweaters. I wear 2.
Right. And and there's a thrift store everywhere you go.
Exactly.
If you need an extra sweater,
Yep.
it might be ugly.
Yep.
But you can get a cheap one along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And
So-
it has the memories of, I went to this thrift store in, Savannah,
Yes.
Georgia, and I remember that, and I got
Yeah.
to interact with the community and spend some time there, and
Yeah.
I have this sweater now, and
Yeah.
maybe I'll drop it off in Santa Cruz or at a Goodwill, but yeah.
I know people that think of a thrift store as their closet.
Uh-huh.
You leave it at this closet, and you take it out of this closet. This
Yeah.
thrift store, that.
Yeah.
So the priorities, you got to have a bed, you got to have a bathroom, you got to be able to cook, you got to be able to carry water and food, you have to be able to find it. And the worst thing is people that just buy all this stuff and throw it in the van and they can't find anything. And half the time they'll go out and buy a new one. And it's on the bottom of the pile. And you don't do that. Don't do that. Get organizations, if nothing else, just, Rubbermaid totes, big and small, and think about as you're getting organized and ready, think about your life on the road and get the absolute minimum at the beginning, pick it up along the way. I've seen people throw away so much money, and the money they don't have to throw away.
Yeah.
And so that's something to be real careful about. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm done.
No, that's excellent advice. That happened to me last night actually with some cookie cutters because I was making some dog biscuits, and they were half off. I mean, they were $2, but at the end of the day, I had tucked them in the visor above the driver seat, out of the way. And then when it came time to use my cookie cutters, I couldn't find them. And I found them this morning when it was time to hop back in the front and get in the driver. They were, there they are. But I've already made the dog cookies. And I ended up just using like a diamond pattern. So yeah, it was like, I didn't
fine.
need them in the first place. I shouldn't have, necessarily bought them. I'll save them. I'll use them again. I know where they are now.
That's something you enjoy.
But it was funny, that experience that you said of just, yeah, exactly. And that's a good point. Something
That
you
is a
enjoy.
good point.
I have stuff in my van that's just purely for the sake of enjoyment.
Yes.
And I do think that stuff is important. And thinking about what to bring,
Yes.
what do you enjoy in your apartment, and then moving into a vehicle, what are the necessities, and then what are the things that bring you
Right.
joy, and how to incorporate those or make a little space for those.
Yeah, it's important to understand that you're not out here to suffer. I'm not out here because I enjoy suffering and I
Yeah.
want to punish myself. I'm out here
Yeah.
to live my best, highest quality possible life.
Yeah.
And for me, that means having refrigeration. And I didn't have it right away. It took me a while to work my way into having refrigeration, but I knew I was going to get it.
Yeah.
And I have a microwave. And for me, I want a microwave.
Yeah.
You have an oven.
Yes.
And,
Baking and
right.
making dog cookies
Right.
and body butters and things like that. Yeah. My kitchen setup is really important to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so whatever gives you the highest possible quality of life, plan on that, but maybe not right at the beginning. You might have to work your way into it, especially when money is tight.
Yes. Yeah. That's a great point. Yeah. Well, thank you so much
Just
for
some
taking
ideas.
this time. And yeah, I mean, I've learned a lot just listening to these questions and the way you answered them. And I appreciate you taking the time to answer some questions for me. And I've appreciated meeting you and making this connection. And yeah.
My pleasure. It was a real joy to get to know you and do interviews with you. And so, folks, you're very lucky. And if you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, go right now and subscribe. That is a direct order from Bob Wells himself. Right now.
You heard him.
You heard him.
And if you're not subscribed to Bob Wells' channel, Cheap RV Living, I'm telling you to go ahead and go over and subscribe to his channel, because
That would be nice.
there are so many tips and helpful beyond what was just covered here, but in terms of you know, different products and just a whole bunch of things. And I feel like you are a wealth of knowledge around community too, and so you kind of touched on that, and that's an important piece too. You know, it can feel a little isolating at first, I think, or just different moving into a vehicle. So you're kind of a bridge to this van life, particularly in this area of Quartzite. So yeah, check out his channel for more stuff on
Well, I didn't say it, but directly addressing that question is go online if you have any time, and I'm sure you did. Meet people on forums on Facebook and get to know them, and maybe plan on meeting them. If you know someone on Facebook for a while, on a forum for a while, you get to know who's safe and who's not. Meet them in a public place.
Yep.
Yeah, and then you can have already pre-made friends on the road.
Yeah.
That's a good way to do it.
Yep. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.